Coming to you live from Darshan Studios, it's Zinc Comics Exposition with your host, Brian Payne. That's me. Hey, let's put on a show. I'm joined in the studio by the vibrant velvet voice of my lovely wife, Skywalker.
And we are having a wonderful day here of blue skies and sunshine in Homer, Alaska.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but it's 17 degrees.
It's a little
And
chilly.
And tell them about our car. You were trying to go to the bank yesterday, and what happened?
Well, the ice froze around the car. And I had noticed the thick, deep water around the wheels the day before it froze. And I asked you, and you said it'd be okay. But it is not. And it's not like a little bit. I couldn't hit it away because it's still freezing. So I'm not driving the car for a couple of days until the ice melts.
So basically, what happens is we get snow. It snows at night during the, and then it gets warm during the day, and the snow turns to slushy melt. And then at night it gets cold again, and it froze. So it basically froze around the tires of our car, and it's stuck in the ice, kind of like if it was mud, but think icy slush. So we have to wait until it gets slushy enough till back up again. Kind of an unusual problem that I assured my wife would never occur here, but of course, soon as she brought it up, the next day it happened. And now, per usual, the wife and I will continue to discuss Osamu Tezuka's 8-volume manga masterwork, Buddha. Chapter 4, The Announcement. Upon hearing that General Badai defeated the alligator attack and a locust swarm, King Sudahadadan rejoices and sees it as a sign of divine providence, and that his unborn son will be someone important and special. Okay, take it away, Skywalker.
Well, I'm curious, what did you get from this chapter?
Well, from that part, again, I hate to keep going back to my lapsed Catholicism, but again, they keep foretelling the coming of the Buddha in much the same way they foretelled the coming of the Messiah. So I'm not saying that this King Sudahadan, and I'm totally mangling a lot of names, and I will continue to do that throughout our episodes, but I'm at least trying to get my tongue around the Indian language and names. But again, English is a second language to me. Baby talk is my first language. Goo-goo-goo-joob. But anyway, I just keep getting a John the Baptist vibe from, they keep saying he's coming. And then, okay, is that what you were asking?
And is that all you got from that chapter?
No, not all from that chapter.
No, I'm just saying, I'm just talking about what did you pick up from this chapter? Anything important?
Well, this is why I said maybe we only want to do this single chapter, which is a mere couple of 12 pages, something like that, was because it seems to address the larger issues of Buddhism for the first time, and not the fictional story going on in the sub-arc or whatever you call it.
Yeah. Well, what he did. Well, and what's interesting to me is that he is presenting this like you said, like an long awaited for savior, though I think because you told me he was Christian, that's a Christian perspective.
I'm just not sure about that. I just know that he addresses Christianity in a lot of his works, especially Ode to Kirihito. So I don't want to say for sure that he's a Christian, but
it is a very Christian perspective, because The Buddha, I mean, there are prophecies of future Buddhas and Buddhas to come, but it wasn't like there was a whole lot of there wasn't a John the Baptist per se. So it's kind of interesting that he does bring up different things. But anyhow, this is the setup for the birth of the Buddha, because where the general has gone, where the general was getting ready to attack Kapilavastu was the home of the Shakya clan. And the Shakya clan is the clan that Shakyamuni Buddha was born into. And so I don't know the historical truth of whether or not this battle was prevented before his birth, but there were wars among the different tribes and kingdoms in India. So this could very well have happened, and it would have been seen as a kind of like they say in the book, a miracle, because they were really getting ready to fight this general who's going to take over, and everything had been cleared up, so there's no battle. And in addition to there being no battle, the king's name is Sudhodana, and his wife is Maya. So Maya tells her husband she's about this strange dream she's had about an elephant coming from underneath her left arm 6 times. And she has a dream every month. And then her husband talks about how he loves to go hunting, but the last time he tried to hunt an animal, it was a deer. And instead of the deer running away, the deer walked towards him smiling. And then all these other animals came out to him smiling. And so he couldn't, and being friendly. And he said, well, the pleasure of the hunt is in the chase. And without the chase, I've lost my desire to hunt. So these two people are the parents of Shakyamuni, who is the Buddha. And so this is the first introduction of them. And so again, I don't know, I had never read about what the king said happened to him, but the myth about Maya is true, because basically they're saying that the Buddha was born and conceived, had a divine kind of a conception other than just from her husband.
A virgin birth or an immaculate
No,
conception?
no, not so much an immaculate. Well, kind of really in a way, because, and this is happens in a lot of Indian deities, is where they're not born through the usual vagina, through the womb and the vagina. They're conceived in different ways, either through the side of the body, or like Padmasambhava, some are born in, he was born through a lotus. So you don't really know. It's basically, the stories are to say that these were special people and their births were like divinely hailed. And so the whole thing with the animals gets into the Buddha's teaching of compassion and loving all beings and loving all animals. But he also ends the story talking about all the suffering people have, particularly in India. It's saying they're getting ready to enter a 4-month period in which it's so hot and people die. And why is it that we have to suffer so much? And it's like this endless wheel. And in Buddhism, there is a wheel of life, which is used to teach about the suffering that life is, but how we can get out of that suffering. So this is actually the first and solid introduction of Buddhism in the book. You're getting, and anyone who's Buddhist says, we're getting into it now. But so it's nice the way that the story goes in, and it's told as a story and not as a preaching thing, not like even not like as a Bible, but strictly as a story with the characters getting their feelings. And so that's where we are.
Yeah, it ends with why do humans suffer? Why do they live? Why should such a world as ours exist? And why did the universe give birth to it? And that's what, Buddhism is here to answer those questions. And we'll find out more as we read on. My question was, with Maya's dream, the white elephant with 6 tusks enters her body under her left arm. What the heck does that even mean? Do you know? What
Well,
is the relevance of
I,
that?
I really, I'd have to research the symbology of the 6 tucks, but I know that the elephant, the white elephant, has symbolic representation of abundance and good in Hinduism and Buddhism. And I don't know about the left side, although I kind of what I remember is that it was said that he was actually born out of her left side.
Okay. Well, anything else you have to say about this week's chapter?
No, well, I'm just looking forward to the next chapter.
Yeah, I knew you would finally say, like you said, that the Buddhist in you would be happy with this chapter. That's why I wanted to reserve it just for itself, because it seems to address the all life is suffering tenet of Buddhism, one of the noble truths. And we'll be talking more about the Osamu Tezuka's 8-volume manga masterwork Buddha in future episodes. And by way of introduction, Skywalker will now read a poem by our next guest.
This is The Unknown Young One by Inger Simonsen. Oh, lovely one, you, with promises of all that a man ought to do. Oh, unknown young one, with the sign on your brow, a mother's son, with growing strength in your limbs, bold promises in your eyes and lips. Oh, lovely young one, what is your name, your age, your sign? What do you do with your life, your time? Can I hold you, touch you, pretend you're mine? Oh, strange young one, I would like, I would love to turn you on, to touch you, love you, and kiss you. Yes, and learn what it is you would like to do with your time, your life, your you. First published in the Strand Book of Winter Poets, 1974, Strand Literary Editions, Florwayne Publishers, London.
Right now, I'd like to welcome to the program author Inger Simonsen. Welcome to the show, Inger. Your mic is still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Inger, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's very lovely. I love the way you read that. And
Thank you.
That's very nice. I didn't realize it was that good.
Yes, it is a nice poem.
Yeah, as soon as I stumbled upon it, I said, "Oh yeah, we're including this if you gave me permission," and you kindly did. Now, I don't know how we start this, but you've written 2 books. Let me bring those up on the screen.
I actually have 5 books on Amazon.
Well, I started noticing that you had several others, so
These are the 2 important ones.
I made a mental note, don't say 2 books. And of course, I disregarded that mental post-it and immediately said 2 books. But I'm just going to start with the first one and we'll get you talking and we'll go off in whichever direction we go. But Longhaired Lads of London. What year did you move to London from Norway, which is where you grew up? And why? Tell us a little about how it began.
I moved in 1963, and it was, I guess, in the fall. And there's a lot of Norwegian girls that would, do the au pair thing. England, of course, learning English, better than we had in school. That was a big thing. Some went to France, Germany. So it wasn't. I was young, but I knew there were other girls from my village in London, and of course, I went off in a completely different direction after I'd been there for about 6 months, I guess.
Yeah, you would have gotten there right at the beginning of Beatlemania, am I correct?
Yeah, I didn't really know much about it. I mean, when I grew up, the big English stars were Tommy Steele and Cliff Richards
Yeah.
and Adam Faith, so
Yeah, Cliff Richard, people forget how huge he was,
he was, yeah, he was really big.
Yeah.
And Tommy Steele, and he completely disappeared, after some famous fickle and sometimes very short-lived.
So how did you was there culture shock moving from your village in Norway to London?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I mean, of course, everything was very different. And I took the ferry from Bergen and to Newcastle on Tyne, and then I took the train from Newcastle to London, and I was met there by this big guy in a bowler hat, and taken to this gorgeous big house, wall to wall carpeting. I think that was the first time I actually saw wall to wall carpeting. But
Yeah.
it was like a lot of. This is very different.
And
Yeah,
nowadays, everybody rips out their wall-to-wall carpeting to show off their hardwood floors. But in the old days, it was cover up those hardwood floors with wall-to-wall carpeting.
I know. Things change, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how did you go from being an au pair girl to being part of the London In crowd in the swinging 60s? And what was the swinging 60s in London like?
Well, uh, it was kind of many. It changed really quickly. That was one of the things, and I think about it in the beginning with the teddy was sort of mods and rockers and teddy boys and driving around in London and scooters, and then the Rolling Stones and the Pretty Things and all these groups came on the scene, and it just changed.
What were teddy boys?
Teddy boys were it's sort of like not like Hells Angels. They wore jeans and leather jackets and had their hair like Elvis, and
Oh,
they're kind of
okay.
like a more rough crowd.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the 60s, there was the mods and the rockers. They were almost like gangs, but it was more like two cultures. One was kind of old time rockabilly, kind of with the slick back DJ haircuts, and the mods were like all flash dressing and real cool haircuts. And so, and in London, they actually had riots
Yeah,
between the two groups, correct?
yeah, and also in Brighton, up
Yeah.
by the sea. Yeah, so it's just a lot of unrest, and but it was fun. I loved London.
The famous quote by Ringo is they ask him are you a mod or a rocker? And he says, I'm a mocker. So I always thought that was funny.
Well, we said that once. My au pair girlfriend who was from Dover, I think, or Devon. She was English, and we would go out, and she was definitely not a mod, but we were friends, and we would walk down the street, and guys being guys, they would call after us. They'd go, Are you mods or rockers?" And we go, "We're mockers," and then we crack up.
Yeah, that's like me. I'm too young to be a hippie and too old to be a punk rocker. So when people say, "Are you a hippie or a punk?" I say I'm a hunk. So anyway, you mentioned the pretty things. I'm a big fan of the pretty things
Oh, you are?
myself. Yeah, people, everybody knows about the Who, the Kinks, the Rolling Stones, and the Beatles, but the pretty things were right there with them and just as great.
Yeah,
Um, I'm a real fan of particularly the album Parachute,
yeah,
but the album SF Sorrow is really actually the original concept album and came before the Who's Tommy, and people need to remember that. So
yeah.
you
Not
know
not many people know that. And it's
yeah
beautiful album. Yeah, these
uh,
are my friends.
that just amazes me. That just floors me. And but any pretty things story that you have, and you feel free to say none of your business.
Well, I lived. Well, the bass player John Stacks. I went to live with his sister and her husband and two kids in London, and I was kind of like Phil May's girlfriend. So we would, I wasn't working at the time. I had a falling out with the whole. My father died, and I wasn't really, and I had to go back to Norway. My mother was going into the hospital, so it was it was kind of a really awful time for me. But at the same time, I had this adventure with these famous guys that we would have fans chasing us down the street, and they would be on the telly and all that. So it was kind of a very strange thing, and it was lovely that John Stax's sister and her family put me up, because I really was, free falling in a way. So they kind of really took me in and took care of me. It was very tumultuous time.
Yeah, that's that's both good and bad. It's a great story, but at the time, I'm sure it wasn't so great. But to be living with the pretty things, being taken in by the pretty things family, that's pretty cool in my book. And
Yeah,
I do.
and I spent that from the first this what's it the second Christmas, I think, was it in London, with Phil May's family, mom and dad in Kent. So it was, and I'm still in touch with some of them. Phil
For
May,
those
Phil May
for those
passed away.
playing along at home, Phil May, I believe, is the singer of Pretty Things, correct?
Yes, he passed
Yeah.
away last year.
Yeah, I remember when he passed. Yes, sad news indeed.
Yeah,
So you're spending Christmas with the Mays. Christmas with the Mays.
that's right.
Yeah, that's
Flo and
cool.
Charlie and Phil. And I
Yeah.
got to stay in the kitchen with Flo when Phil and Charlie went to the pub.
So, like, what was the scene like? Were there gigs at like a lot of clubs, or like was everybody gigging, or was it all one club where everybody played, or what was the scene like? Or were you even seeing them live?
Yeah, every Tuesday, the Pretty Things would play at the 100 Club on Oxford Street in London. So, and then they would be appearing on various TV shows like Ready Steady Go, and then they would tour and travel. I traveled with them to, God, was it Cambridge? I guess it was Cambridge. I went with them to one concert in the big van. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
So it was, and then of course they introduced me to the Rolling Stones. So then I would hang out with the Rolling Stones quite a bit.
Yeah, it wasn't who's Taylor? Wasn't Taylor originally a Rolling Stone before he became a pretty thing?
Yeah, Dick
Uh,
Taylor. Dick, he was one of the original Rolling Stones together with Ian Stewart and
right,
Brian Jones.
right.
Yeah, so they were
Yeah,
the earliest.
yeah, that's what again, playing along at home, people forget, everybody knows Mick and Keith and God bless them, they're great. But people forget Derek Taylor, Ian Stewart, Brian Jones, those are kind of the origins of the Rolling Stones. Without them three, they might not have happened. And especially early on, Brian Jones was a force, but it was really Ian Stewart's band originally. He was kind of the driving force and ended up playing on a lot of their records, but not being part of the actual group. So, again, I'm just trying to, I'm a rock and roll buff, so I just want to make sure I'm putting an asterisk to every name you mention here.
Okay. Yeah, now Stu and I were friends for quite a few years. Um, and it was um, it was fun hanging out with them. That and it was fun in those early days. Whoever had a car that they could go from to gigs in, that was their roadie. And Stu had a car, he had a van. So I mean, they weren't making a lot of money. They were all struggling.
Right.
And the pretty things had had a flat in London, and Brian Jones used to spend a lot of time there. I don't know if he actually lived there for a while. So it was all, and Dick Taylor, they all knew each other, from Kent, and I think Dick already knew Mick and Keith.
Okay.
So they go back, to
Yeah.
school days.
Okay. Before we move on, is there anything else you'd like to say about the long haired lads of London?
No, it's just it's my story, and it's a lot of anecdotes that I was hoping that people who are, um, fans of the British invasion groups might find interesting, because sometimes I think that people prefer to just read researched history rather than actual, you know, storytelling about somebody who was there.
I
And
find
No,
personal anecdotes very interesting, even more interesting than the didactic researched history. What were you going to say,
uh,
Skywalker?
the same thing. That the stories, people like a good story, and
yeah,
it
And
makes you remember the history better.
and everybody has a story, and you have some very fascinating ones, as evidenced already. Um, you emigrated to the U.S. in the late '60s, which informed your next book, "Stars in the Lobby: My Hollywood Years." Tell
yeah,
us what it was like to be a single mom in Hollywood during the '70s.
I actually immigrated to the United States in 1966, January 1966. I came to New York. So I was a New Yorker for a couple of years before I went to San Francisco a few times, and then Oliver was actually born in San Francisco. So then we moved to New Mexico, and then I had friends that had moved to LA or Hollywood. So, and they kept telling me, "Oh, you have to come out here. You really like it." And so I did, and I'm just surprised we even survived. It was really hard.
Okay, again for
Back to London as soon as I could, 1970.
so you went from San Francisco to L.A. and then back to London.
San Francisco to Santa Fe, New Mexico, then to Los Angeles, and then back to London.
Okay. but eventually you came back to America. Tell us about that.
I couldn't stay away. I
Yeah.
always wanted to come to America. It just, my dad spent a lot of time in the United States, and he wanted to immigrate, but my mom and my older sisters did not want to go. So we stayed in Norway. And so he actually helped me through friends of his in New Jersey to get a green card. So that was, yeah, well, being a single mom was tough. And which is one of the reasons I kept going back to Norway too, because I just felt that Oliver needed to know his family. I felt very alone. I kept thinking, what if something happens to me? Is anybody going to? What's going to happen to Oliver? So.
And for those at home, Oliver is a friend of Darshan and friend of the show, Oliver Simonsen, creator of Captain Zap and producer of the Cerebus animated movie.
Yeah.
So, again, you worked at two famous hotels, the Ambassador Hotel, where Bobby Kennedy died, and the Chateau Marmont, where John Belushi died. What years was this, and what can you tell us about that?
The Ambassador Hotel was short and sweet. It was 1974 to 1975. And actually, the comedian Gary Shandling is the one who got me the job in the working in the reception area. So, and I was just so happy to have that job, and the hotel was just so beautiful. I can't believe that they tore it down. That just does not sit right with me. So I left there because I needed to be closer to home. Oliver was going to school and needed to be picked up and brought to school. So that's Chateau Marmont was actually walking distance. Well, it's a long walk, but I did it in high heeled shoes, 30-minute walk, come rain or shine. And I loved the Chateau Marmont, and it just had a completely different vibe. I love both of them, but they were so completely different. And when I went, and I had already been to the Chateau Marmont because I had some of my English friends stayed there. So, or people I knew so stayed there. So I was familiar with the place.
Yeah, it's a famous hotel, and even when I went to LA, that was one place I walked by just to make sure I saw while I was in LA. And again, like you, nobody walks in LA, but I was out there walking too. I was walking from Santa Monica Pier, and I tried to walk to the Hollywood sign, and
Oh
I
my,
ended up in some neighborhood and just like totally gave up and needed water and ended up walking back. So that's my Hollywood
well,
story.
that's quite a walk.
Yeah, it was quite a walk.
Yeah.
You want to tell any of your Hollywood stories, Skywalker?
Well, I lived on near Hollywood Boulevard for a short time. I was in walking distance to the Chinese theater,
Okay.
but I never tried to walk to the Hollywood side.
Well,
And
you a lot closer than he in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
We actually did walk once we walked from the Griffith Observatory to the sign, and that's
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I got that crazy notion in my head, but I looked up at the sign and I wanted to walk up there, and needless to say, I ended up in some neighborhood getting dirty looks. But
Yeah.
so, what year were you there, Skywalker?
I don't know. I don't
Okay,
keep track of years very well,
okay.
but it was in the late 80s, I would say. In the
I don't know
80s,
about that.
probably.
I don't know if that jives. If you were gonged on the Gong Show twice, Yes, folks, Skywalker appeared on the Gong Show twice and was gonged both times. I don't know that that would be the 80s. Maybe.
Well,
Maybe. I don't
I
know.
was yeah, I wasn't
Move
gonged
on.
twice. I just I wasn't gonged twice. I was gonged once. The first time I didn't even make it to the show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, see, that's what happened. They cut me off.
Bang a gong. Okay. Well, one thing the Marmont is famous for is Graham Parsons. The cover of GP, the album by Graham Parsons, his first solo album, has the cover photos are taken in the lobby of the Chateau Marmont.
That's correct. Yeah.
You knew that, okay? I was hoping to blow your mind and can't do it. So
No, I recognized the chair, and of course I met Graham Parsons. So and unfortunately, when I went to work there, he had died already.
he had
So,
already passed.
but
Yeah.
but it's funny thing. I worked with this elderly lady, Corinne, and she had been at the chateau, I think, since the 50s. She died in the late 70s, I think. So this lovely woman. And she and Graham Parson had this sort of peculiar, cute sort of friendship. And he would hang out in the reception, sometimes at night when it was quiet, and they would just sort of shoot the breeze. And I remember she told me once that um, he was sitting on this old chair, and all of a sudden the chair just collapsed under him. So it was a very interesting. So a lot of interesting things happen in that lobby.
Yeah.
Graham Nash would and Richard Gere would come down and play the piano. Um, and Robert De Niro would, come down and talk because people stay there for a long time, and sometimes, they were recording and making movies and coming out from New York or wherever, and they were kind of lonely, I think.
Yeah.
So they,
That's just amazing that,
Wow.
you're getting a private concert from Graham Nash on the hotel piano. That's cool. Now, one person I noticed that you mention in one of the blurbs, I just have to ask about, and that is writer Anais Nin, or is it Nin?
a nice
Y-
nin. Yeah.
yeah. Do you have a story about her, or was she just
Well,
one of the guests?
no, I don't remember her staying there actually. I just remember one of the British journalists, or that was staying there, was reading the Anais Nin diaries, and of course I had heard there was a lot of buzz about her diaries right at that time, mid 70s, and when she was leaving this journalist, she brought down all these like 13 volumes, I think, of Anais Nin's diaries, and I put them, at night when it was quiet, I would just sit there and read. And then one night, the phone rang, and it was like this woman, and she had called earlier too. I recognized her. I recognized her accent, and she didn't leave a message. So when the second time she called, I said, well, she was asking for Henry Jaglum, and I said, well, he's not in, but can I take a message? And she said, would you please tell him to call Anais Nin? And I almost fell off my chair.
Yeah.
I was just reading her books, and I was just this in awe of this woman.
I just almost fell off my chair with you mentioning Henry Jaglum. I mean, you just are dropping names that are blowing my mind here. You've lived quite a life, Mrs. Simonson.
I
So
guess
who was Henry Jaglum?
he is produced and directed or made quite a few sort of
Okay.
movies that are not mainstream. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, you've seen his films.
Okay.
If I showed you him, you would recognize him. He always wears this distinctive hat, and in a lot of his films. So
Yeah, him and his brother lived for, months and months and months at the hotel. So I
Okay.
mean, some people just, it was like their home away from home. So you got to know them fairly well. Like, Leonard Cohen and Lynn Redgrave.
Wow.
Yeah. And who else? Well, Robert De Niro had the penthouse for 3 years.
Wow.
yeah, I knew De Niro was a staple of the chateau. That's Was he a nice guy? Did you get to know him or?
He seemed nice enough. He wasn't, very chatty around me or any of the other girls that worked there. Although I know that one of the male guys that worked nights told me that he would have really long talks with Robert De Niro. So maybe he felt more at ease talking to, a male person. But
Well,
he never said to me. He was very quiet, you know, and it was just really, really different. Uh, you know, it just it was such a strange place. I mean, I'll never forget when one of the maids threw away the salad that these two actresses were making, and they were yelling at me, because the salad was gone when they came back from the pool. And I'm just so lame. I'm going, well, that's life at the chateau.
That's life at the chateau. That's a great way to end this. Is there any story that you want to tell that I did not ask about? Is there anything I should have asked that I didn't? Now is the time to bring that up, Inger.
I honestly can't think of anything. I know we were pretty friendly with Lynn Redgrave and her family for a while. They lived in one of the bungalows, and Oliver went to school with her son Benji. So there was a
Wow.
lot of interaction between us. They would some pick Oliver up, when I was working. They pick up Oliver up at school and bring him to the chateau, and he would be, they would be playing until if I got off in the, I'd take him home with me when I got off the shift. I got off work. So it was a lot of things like that. Maximilian Schell, for instance, he would always, when he stayed there a lot, and he would just always offer up his room if Oliver was there. He said, well, just give him the key and let him watch TV.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah, so it was so I mean, well, he Maximilian Schell wasn't there.
Yeah. But still, some people wouldn't do that anyways.
this is this is true, but I guess I guess he just trusted that
Yeah.
Oliver didn't get into things. He was like very responsible little boy.
Yeah.
I've known your son Oliver now for over 10 years, and he's like an onion. There's layers upon layers. I'm finding out new things every day. He's an interesting guy. You done good there.
I think
Um,
I was just lucky.
yeah, yeah.
I think I was
Uh,
lucky. But yeah, I honestly can't think. I mean, there's so many things, and it's like you say, I maybe drop names, but it's not my intention to be a name dropper. It's just that's my life. That's the people I met.
yeah, I do not mean that as a derogatory term. I still talk about the time I met Chuck Norris briefly, and so you got. And I'm not even a fan of Chuck Norris's work, so so anyway, Long-Haired Lads of London, Stars in the Lobby, My Hollywood Years are both available on Amazon. I'll have links to the to her Amazon page, to Inger's Amazon page below this video. So definitely check them out. They're both fascinating stories, and she's lived a fascinating life, and this has been a fascinating interview. We appreciate having you on, Inga.
Well, thank you for having me on. And I also enjoyed the Buddha story.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
It's
that it,
it,
I say I when I lived in San Francisco and I was a hippie, then we would read books like Siddhartha and Tao Te Ching, and all that. So it's not unfamiliar stories.
yes, yes. Oh,
Yeah, you're kind of a captive audience in the green room and have to listen. So it's nice to know that you enjoyed what we were talking about.
I did. No, very interesting. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, what were you saying,
I was
Skywalker?
just gonna say it was a pleasure meeting you and hearing some of your stories, Inga.
Well, thank you, and likewise.
Okay, stick around. Don't go away, but I'm going to end today's episode now. And finally, until next time, you've got to think zinc. Think a zinca. Think a zinca. Think a zinca. Think a zinca.